-2 presentation. I'm sure, a lot of the solid RF guys are still kind of going, how does that apply? I'm an old network security guy. I used to work for the Navy and do encryption equipment. And before FIPS 140 came out, military, government, low budget, they'd buy us our encryption devices from fun places like France, China, Israel. And we found after we put them on the networks and we looked at the traffic that the algorithms were really easy to guess, such that some of the vendors had actually put backdoors in their encryption equipment that they sold to the US government. Go figure. So things like FIPS 140-2, that makes a huge difference in my world. Especially and if you're an RF guy, you can't think, well, that really doesn't impact me too much. More and more, as they're going across things like Cisco IPCO routers, more and more we're pushing, it's RF when it hits that tower, hits that network, now it's an IP packet. So keep in mind, this is very applicable. Speaking of applicable, with the fires going on down in San Diego, we kind of wanted to use, Dave and I kind of want to use that kind of a demonstration to point out to you guys what our functions are, where we come together, and where we have some separate functions. How many of you know the difference between the Department of Homeland Security Office of Emergency Communications Regional Coordinator and the FEMA Regional Coordinator for Communications? Tim, hand down, cheater. Okay. That's the best answer I've ever heard. I get so many calls. Do you have petty cash of $50,000? I need a new tower. Like, well, that's cheap for a tower, but okay, sure. I'll call Dave. So using the San Diego fire as an example. So for example, right now, state of California has declared emergency down there. I already have federal resources down there, law enforcement, federal fire, military down there who are already calling me and saying, hey, you work with all these locals, you know these agencies, how can we help? What do we need to do comms-wise? We've already done a lot of comms planning down there. We've been burnt over before, 2003, 2007. Mothership DHS has already told me to bump up my flight. I'm flying back down there a little earlier than I had planned on today. When I get down there, I'm probably going to go into a county EOC or potentially even one of the city EOCs, or I get forward deployed out to one of the mobile command posts, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And my job is to be that front of the spear, that tactical subject matter expert of getting agencies to work together. Sometimes it's a liaison. I may end up functioning as a COM-C, a COM-L, or even a scribe. Who knows? Now, so the state's already sending everything they can down there. It's hot down there. We have Riverside County. We have a lot of other places where fires are popping up. There is obviously a potential for it to become a Stafford Act declaration, where FEMA gets involved and coordinates all those efforts. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do on once it becomes that Stafford Act piece? Oh yeah, Mike.
Know a little bit about the Stafford Act, but more on my side from what's known as disaster emergency communications. What we work with when there is what we call the flag goes up, as we say. We typically, like we did yesterday, we practiced in an exercise here yesterday to practice what we would practice down in Southern California. We would establish a disaster emergency communications, basically a group down at the location where most of the fires are taking place at, an established state operating location, that sort of thing. And then in that presence, we would have a tactical side that would have to handle the tactical communications issues, first responder communications, and we would have a restoration side, a commercial restoration that would also address the cellular aspect of this. And both Tom and I would be sitting on this and working on the shortfalls that occur. The cellular outages, for instance, we would go out and send a team out from FCC to do possibly a survey to go out there and find out what cellular networks are currently up and currently operating. In addition, the state might come to either one of us and ask us about, say, for instance, in reestablishing connectivity for some first responder networks that may have been taken out as a result of the fires. Maybe some of the repeaters have gone down, that sort of thing. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. Tom and I work side by side in making sure this works together well, and I think it's a good pairing. So
it is, and even though I tend to distinguish ourselves between I'm tactical, he's strategic, the reality of it is the mission and what happens. In the exercise yesterday, the way that really should have rolled is I was actually supposed to be in the FEMA chair. I was kind of shadowing, learning from Dave, but next time we do that, Dave is actually going to be at the state EOC handling the state requests, and I would actually be sitting in his chair. So we're pretty interchangeable as far as that goes. I hope that clears up a little bit of the confusion.
Something I want to add here real quick. What Tom mentions is really great. Tom and I came up with this. We're feds, of course, but we're also residents of the state of California and, of course, of the region. So, primarily the way we designed this as far as working together and how we set this up, we developed working together. So, we're in for the long term on this.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so that said, I'm going to roll into, wish I had known that before I ordered my mobile command post. Just to give you guys some background, those of you that haven't seen the bio, or I can't even remember what's in the bio, I'm a reserve deputy sheriff down in San Diego County. I started in search and rescue in 1997 as a search and rescue medic, and then went as a tactical medic. 9/11 hit, and even though I was doing IT stuff for the military, 9/11 hit, and all of a sudden they said, you speak this weird public safety language, you're no longer IT. So I got lent out to all kinds of three-letter acronym agencies to about 2007. Went to a lot of bunkers, saw a lot of mobile command posts, saw a lot of the real nice Jack Bauer, 24 type command posts. And then 2007, I got lent out to Office of Emergency Communications, and nationally went around and did assessments on command posts, ICS structure, that kind of fun stuff. Did the 2010 security assessment for the Boston Marathon. Their mobile command post at the time was this really nice, huge RV that literally had no engine, and they would contract out with a tow truck to tow it out onto the course, drop it there. 3 days later, tow truck would come back, pick it up. Worked for them. If you leave with anything from this PowerPoint, it's that one size doesn't fit all. The biggest is not always the best, and it's really mission driven. So if you have a vendor or you have peers telling you, you've got to buy the biggest, that $500,000, that $1 million command post, all the bells and whistles, think it through. It's not necessarily so. I'll show you why. Now, coming from search and rescue, this is typically what we had as a command post. Most of you guys have worked rural. It's the hood of your car. It's the tailgate. It's where you're doing 90% of your operations and your planning. And there's nothing wrong with that. It works. All right, so let's talk about the monster guys, the big trailers. They're very, very cool in that you can put racks of IT gear, racks of radios in there. You can put ACUs. You can talk to anybody out of this thing. You can put your entire staff in there. The challenge kind of becomes, let's see, where's my laser here? This thing. How many people in your agency actually have a license to drive something like this? Bit of a challenge. Also, road conditions. I'm from San Diego. People think of San Diego as, hey, you guys are just beach, surf, all is good. We actually have peaks up to 7,500 feet, 8,000 feet. I pulled bodies out of the snow in April. So consider doing that with the storm. You're not getting that thing up there. It's not happening. It's too big. Also, too, with fires. 2003 was our first set of really bad fires down there. They had dropped something very similar to this there. This thing went off transporting teams, and all of a sudden, the fire changed direction. It was coming back to the CP. Guess what we lost? So very, very useful, but keep in mind, it's very, very static. You're not moving that quickly when things turn around on you. And also, because it takes the special license to get this thing moved, your air brake endorsement, that kind of thing, most agencies, as I mentioned, don't have a lot of people who can drive it. So when you're doing exercises like your rally last week, if it's something that takes a special driver, takes special effort to get that out for an exercise, you tend not to exercise it. What happens if you don't exercise it? You tend not to really use it. And or when that incident happens, you don't know how to use it or deploy it properly. All right, here's my bias. I like the little guys. Anybody can tow this. You have a Yukon, you have a Tahoe, you have an Expedition. I've even seen somebody use a Taurus once for one of these things. Big thing, they can go just about anywhere. They can get up that windy, icy road. You can move them pretty quickly. I've actually seen once where, as a burn-over drill of fire guys, they actually got 10 of their guys and just literally picked it up and moved it half a mile down the road. Not something you're going to do with that monster. Let's see. Once again, as I'm talking about the monster one, it's hard to get out for exercise. Something like this, it's relatively easy. Most of you already have an SUV or something that can tow something like this. You're not relying on the other guy that you owe overtime to or a case of beer to help get out for your mobile command rally. All right, you're not going to get a lot of staff in there. You're not getting a lot of gear in there. And trailers in general take more time to set up than a self-propelled, than a bus kind of thing. Because even on the big ones, we tend to jam all kinds of tables and pop-up tents and all kinds of cash rows, all kinds of Pelican cases. So we spend probably easily the first 10 to 20 minutes just pulling stuff out before we actually operate. Now, obviously, you're not going to operate a whole command staff in there. Some folks will actually operate 2 or 3 people in there. Some agencies don't even try to operate in it. It is strictly a hauler for everything else you're going to need. Favorite thing is they're cheap. You could buy 2. All right, the real cool stuff. Some of the feds, we actually have a couple nice big buses and cool stuff. Beauty of it is, you turn it on, you drive it there, you're 10A, you're ready to operate. You're ready to do what needs done. Yeah, once again, you've got all the room for your gear, you've got the room for your staff, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, your staff are doing fine. Once again, these things tend to be large. Who can drive it? San Diego County Sheriff's Department, about 4,500 folks, sworn professional staff, including reserves. We have 2 people certified to drive our largest command post. Not a really good plan, especially right now. Once again, same thing with road conditions. They first bought, I remember it was like 99 or 2000, the county bought one of these big monster trucks, and we're all excited, yeah, cool, we're going to actually be able to use this, not be on the tailgate or the hood of the car. That thing couldn't make it to about 60% of our call-outs, just because they were rural, windy roads, that kind of fun stuff. And, of course, it's not cheap. The other thing, too, is unless you actually are from an agency that either runs school buses or runs detentions, the large buses for moving our favorite guys around county and state, you're probably not going to have a heavy lift mechanic or a heavy mechanic who can actually maintain it. So now you're looking at contract support for how are you keeping that thing up to speed so you don't end up like Boston PD and you get a tow truck to move your command post around. Dimensions, dimensions, dimensions. What's that term? Measure twice, cut once, measure 3 times, something like that. That definitely fits for here. What you have up here is a picture of Houston Fire Department. They bought a nice new extra, now this is called a ladder truck. I'm not a fire guy, right? Is this a ladder truck? The big thing on top? All right. Didn't fit in the bay. And then you might, it's kind of far back there, but you guys might see this black line right here. Power line right in front of the station. Something to think about. Also, too, is when we tend to buy command posts, we tend to think, you look at the specs from the vendor. Okay, it's this tall, it's this wide, and we look at the bay structure where we're going to park it. But then we don't think we added a couple AC units to the top of it. We added a satellite dish. We added some mirrors without really thinking. I never went back and rechecked that and where I'm going to park the thing. This is my favorite. You guys have probably noticed this is no matter how fancy your command post is, the one thing that gives people the most grief is the awning. It never seems to work. And your incident commander, your ops chief, are they doing their job? No, they're out there with a broom. They're out there with a baton, beating on the awning, trying to get it to deploy correctly. So your check-in and your window and your T-card people actually have some shade out there. People are coming in. Also, too, know the wind load of that awning. As much as I enjoy a little bit of hazing with the probies and the cadets, they get really frustrated when they're chasing your awning across the desert for the 5th time in a month. What else we got? Know your vehicle weight. If you're really looking at mutual aid, and because obviously you guys know we sent a lot during Sandy, we sent a lot of resources back that way. Different states actually have different requirements on what can go on their roads. What might be fine here might not make it going through South Dakota. We actually had to have Caltrans and CHP make phone calls to every single state ahead of the convoys to kind of clear some of that and get waivers. My favorite, airlift. If you think it's going to fit in a C-130 or a C-5A and it's going to get flown somewhere, find somebody who used to be in the Air Force, specifically a loadmaster. They have very interesting ideas on what hazmat is and what's going to fit in there. If you think you're just going to roll in and they're going to take off and fly, that's a conversation you want to have way ahead of time if you're thinking you're ever going to let that asset be flown, or the Air Force will fly it for you. They had a lot of fun tarmac incidents where people were just camping on tarmacs because the loadmaster said no. And they own that plane as far as that goes. Trucker RV GPS. Once again, a Sandy lesson learned. Big rigs, we all go flying out the East Coast. East Coast says, here's your assignment. You guys drive down here, no problem. East Coast, more than us, tends to have a lot of real low bridges. 200, 300-year-old bridges. They're only 7 foot high. Your command post isn't going to go there. We lost hours of teams getting to the bridge going, at least we didn't get them stuck, but going, that's not going to work. We lost hours having to reroute. There's some really nice trucker GPSs out now. Magellan does them, Magellan, Garmin. You just punch in height, weight, width, all that good stuff, and it actually routes you based on the infrastructure. All right, internal configurations. Up here on the left, you've got the very open, very configurable. Down here on the right, it's very tight, very mission specific. If you have one command post, and you're using that command post for everything from SWAT to fires to SAR to civic events, I'd recommend you look at something like this. Every mission is going to be slightly different. You're going to need a different configuration inside that thing. Now, there is value to having something like this. I'm also a support to our crisis negotiation team. We used to say hostage negotiators, but now it's more like barricaded suspects. But at any rate, what we do is we have a special room. Actually, I think this is backwards. We have a special room in the back where only the primary negotiator and the secondary negotiator are. Nobody else goes in that room. That room is blocked off. We have a remote speaker that comes out to the center where we can actually hear the conversation through the throw phone or through the Bluetooth cell phone pickup. And then what we're working on right now is actually running monitors back into the room, whereas we get hooks and triggers. A hook is, we know this guy loves his 4-year-old daughter. We put that on his screen, put her name, put information about her. Trigger is, the guy was abused by his dad. Let's not talk to him about his dad. So that's a very specific configuration. So once again, it goes to your mission. Santa Clara Sheriff's Department, we have 6 of these. So they dedicated one to just that mission. Keep in mind what your mission is. Like most of us, if you have a normal budget, you're only going to get one. Consider having something much more flexible. How many of you know what a bus magnet is? Not surprised. A bus magnet can be your best friend. It can be someone you don't like so much. But what it is 2 o'clock in the morning, you show up, you're getting your command post going, and instead of going to check-in, instead of going to staging, all your buddies and everybody in the world wants to come on the command bus and see what's going on. They want to see the maps. They want to see the ops briefing before it's ever done. And even though you're friends, you've got to keep those people off your bus. You're never going to get anything done. So here's a couple suggestions. If you can, don't have a restroom on your command post. Because you're in the middle of nowhere and you are the only bathroom, it is really hard to tell people, no, you can't come use the bathroom. That's just not going to fly. If you do have a bathroom on it, keep in mind, who's ever managing it, somebody gets to clean it. Someone gets a dump to take and do all that fun stuff. You might consider trailered toilets. I've seen a lot of agencies do that. Hard part is, nobody really wants to be the guy, yeah, I drive the toilets on the mission. But I tell you what, those are the guys I buy free booze for at the end of each mission. Because they keep people off my bus. Same thing with the kitchen. What's the number one thing we really need as far as kitchen goes on our command posts? Coffee. So coffee maker, yes. Ice chest, yes. Let's not do the sink. Let's not do the microwave. Once again, keep those people off our bus as much as we can. All right, the fun stuff. Cellular, MiFi, SATCOM. Most vendors try to be pretty good with us. And if they notice we haven't had activity on our accounts, they go ahead and they will disable the SATCOM. They'll disable the MiFi. Another reason to exercise it a lot, also I know some agencies, what they do is part of their rollout procedures, their call-out procedures, even if it's 3 in the morning, they call the vendor. Guess what? We're rolling out. We have an expectation that our service time is going to be working. So something to keep in mind. Where to park the command post. Sometimes you're the hasty team. You're the person laying out what that's going to look like, what the base camp is going to look like. And sometimes you're driving it there. There needs to be a communication when you get there, and you need to have some appreciation for where you're parking it. If they're parking it, if they're asking you to park it right between 2 very large, two buildings, or you're in a valley out in the desert, and you're in a valley, 2 large hills, and you know that I don't have a view of the southern sky, I don't have line of sight to any of my radio towers, you need to have that communication. There might be a real good reason they want you to park where they do, but then you need to inform them what they're not going to get by doing that. If you have a computer network on board, consider having a networkable drive. If you're doing SAR or fire ops, or you're supporting GIS, they want that data right there. Because otherwise, especially your GIS people, who's going to kill all your data off your satellite or your Wi-Fi? It's going to be your GIS folks. As much as possible, have the maps they'll possibly need, anything else those guys would need on a local drive on your bus. Power. Consider what that power load's going to be. I'll come back to the generators here in a minute. But Well, oh, one more thing on the generators is some people have, oh, nice command bus, everything's in here. They accept it, they're good. Before you sign off, have them kick the generators on, turn every piece of gear, load it, actually see if you can hit a tower, see if you get noise or not. It's amazing how many vendors get away with, oh, here it is, sign, gun, and a week later, hey, every time the generator's on, I can't seem to transmit and something's not quite right. Check that. Label everything. This is my favorite, having run more cable than I think I ever want to run before. If you're that person who's run all this cable before, you've run the antennas, you've run the network cable, and you're not available, or I get hit by a truck, nobody else knows where any of that cable is going. And when somebody comes back to upgrade it or add more capability to it, they're going to have to cut it, pull it back, and run new stuff. Also, not just the cables, but label the front of your radio heads. When's the last time that fleet map was updated? And by who? Put a date on it. Obviously, I'm a little anal about labeling things, but 2 o'clock in the morning, it really, really helps. One of my favorite things is Wi-Fi for the base camp. A lot of folks, we have these really nice big command posts, and what are they? They're big metal boxes. There's a guy out in the Pacific Islands, who I won't quite name, who got this $1 million command post and said, oh yeah, I got the Wi-Fi router, no external antenna. Sitting right there in his rack. So everybody in the command post has got Wi-Fi, but that tent doesn't have it, that doesn't have it, nobody else in base camp. So consider running or ask for a external antenna run for your Wi-Fi so you can actually support base camp ops. Okay, speaking of ops, my favorite things. Once again, that 2 o'clock in the morning thing, that checklist is priceless. ICS, we do this. We have it for ops, we have it for plans. Your driver should have this. Especially if you're hooked up to shore power, if you have stuff charging, you're really going to want the driver to go disconnect that before he takes off. Not everybody has the real nice fire automatic disconnect. Also, too, the stuff in the back. A lot of times the charge stuff, we have to pull it out of the Pelican cases. We have to pull it out of the cabinets. So have that as part of the checklist. Disconnect shore power, go back, make sure everything's secure, whatever else you need to do to roll that thing out safely. Training. How this is deployed and what comes with it. And this kind of goes with training a little bit too. Benita and I are friends. I know she's got resources. I could ask Benita, hey, Benita, I need one of your smaller comms trucks for this or for that. No problem. Benita's not there. I don't know who I'm talking to. I also have to, she has to manage my expectations of requesting something. If I get a command vehicle from her, am I getting a driver? Am I getting a radio operator? Am I getting a tech? Techs and radio operators are not always the same thing. Am I getting a scribe? There are some agencies now where, as part of this MOU SOP, they're even doing force protection, which I think is great. Keeps bus magnets away from my command post. But this is something to definitely think. Also, too, I've seen this a lot where U5 now have keys to the command post. U5, I'm going to call at 2 o'clock in the morning on a rotating basis. Congratulations, you have the keys, you can rock and roll. What I didn't tell you is it's stored in the sheriff's facility in a protected lot, and I haven't given you prox card access or asked anybody at the sheriff's department to get that for you. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're standing outside the sheriff's facility going, yep, there it is. Something to think about. All right, more things to think about. I think a lot of you have heard the story about putting down concrete walkways at a university. Came out 10, 15 years ago. This one facilities guy, right before school's about to start, hasn't put these walkways down. The dean asked him, hey, why haven't you laid out the concrete? School's about to start. Facility guy says, give me 2 weeks, I'll show you why. After 2 weeks, there were natural paths in the grass going from the cafeteria, going to the library, going back to the dorms. Then the facility guy just laid concrete down with those natural paths that had already been established. Same thing with your command post. You can plan and you can plan, but nothing really works, contact with the enemy. Your first mission, that table, really, I keep bumping into that table. It's not serving any purpose. You have to evolve your mission. You have to evolve the command post. Just because it came ordered that way, don't keep it that way if it doesn't function for the mission. This is the shaking part. Once again, this has a lot to do with bus magnets too. On your smaller command post, I don't care how well you crib it. Get some fire guys to help you though. Fire guys are great at cribbing and leveling stuff out for those that have the fancy auto levelers. Because there's nothing more annoying than that 300-pound deputy who bounces on and off your command post every 5 minutes as you're trying to work up a plan. Also too, when you're looking at this, include people in your agency who are better than you in particular fields. None of us are perfect at IT. None of us are perfect at RF. None of us are perfect on vehicle maintenance and generators. Include these people in your planning. Also, too, the younger folks you work with. You're in a firehouse, you're in a police station, and you see that guy or gal who's got 3 or 4 laptops, and they're bouncing around, running their website, doing this, doing that. That might be somebody you want to have help you with the IT. For 2 reasons. One's the obvious. They can help you get up to spec. They can also provide some good ideas. But have some vested interest in this. I don't know about you 5, but I'd like to make that list of people who at 2 o'clock in the morning can actually be on that command staff, be part of that team, and thinking of succession planning too. You want to get some other people invested in your command post. And that is it. Thank you. All right, let's see if we can all bring yours up real quick, Dave.
Anyway, while he's setting that up, I had some comments on some of the stuff and echoing to what Tom has here with regard to the height of the vehicle. Had some personal experiences when I was serving in Sandy. We ended up driving some of the emergency vehicles around out there and found that unlike places like California, in places like New York, they have these bridges that are curved. So even though it says 16 feet in the center, it may not be 16 feet over in that left or that right lane. So that was pretty exciting, getting out every time and then checking the bridge to see if the top of the thing might clear, especially when all the cars are going by at 60 miles an hour. So that was interesting. Also, another thing I wanted to echo with Tom here, SMEs. That's a huge asset. A lot of people will try and do this kind of thing themselves. The best thing you can have is SMEs and not be afraid to use them. Those are the kind of folks I like working with who aren't worried about what they know, what they don't know, but at least who they can contact. Who's the SME for that particular, be it IT, communications, whatever it is, somebody who knows how to work that vehicle, drive that vehicle. Those are the kind of folks you want to work with. Give you some idea on my background here a little bit too. Actually, 24 years in the Air Force, active duty myself. Spent all that time pretty much as a comms technician, climbing towers in strange places all over the world, throughout the Pacific. In Alaska, I can tell you all kinds of wild polar bear, black and brown bear stories while trying to look for cables in strange places. Also in the Pacific, having to deal with things such as invisible snails and hiring kahunas to help me bless the site every day, which I had to do in order to install some communication networks out there. After about 24 years in the Air Force, I went to work for the FAA as a telecommunications engineer as we're working in Alaska, and was installing satellite systems throughout the state of Alaska to handle the FAA traffic. And after that, went to work for the Coast Guard as a project manager for a statewide communications network throughout Hawaii. And then came to work for for FEMA for the last 6 years or so, which has been pretty exciting. Never a dull day, I'll tell you. Oh, terrific. Okay, so here we go. Okay, here's a real quick view of our. We've got 10 regions here. This is basically what we cover. What you don't see in our region, Region 9 here, are some of the places Tom named off. Of course, we've got Guam, we've got Hawaii, but in addition, you've got American Samoa way out there. You've got CNMI. And I'll say this much too, there are other areas, think Haiti here, there are other areas that currently aren't on that map that conceivably, depending upon the situation, could become part of our area, Marshall Islands. Yep, those kind of areas that could become part of our area of responsibility. So these are the areas we cover, at least for Region 9. What currently happens when first responders respond to disaster, and how does FEMA? First responders utilize disaster emergency communications to coordinate and support disaster recovery efforts. Let me go on to the next one here a little more. What exactly is disaster emergency communications? This is the tough one because people get that mixed up. I usually try to say there's a difference between what we call internal communications and external communications. The external communications from a government perspective is the first responder side, the cellular communications, pretty much the public and first responder communications. Historically, the internal communications has been the communications that we would set up for our FEMA folks to operate in their facilities and working directly with the state. So this capability, disaster emergency communications, or this whole concept has only been around, I think, about 9 years, I believe now. It's about 9 years, give or take. This is kind of a long one here, but I'll go over this real quick. Basically, these are some of the goals. The number one, actually, the most important, is basically we're here to support what the whole thing says, essentially interoperation of communications, communication survivability, and most important of all, and I'm not even sure it's in there, it's probably buried in there, building relationships. And that's what Tom and I do, building relationships with you folks. So when the flag does go, as I say, when the disaster does take place, we know who to reach out to and you know who to reach back to. Here we talk about the operability, the ability to establish and sustain communications, interoperability, of course you know what that is. VHF radio talking to UHF radio, or VHF radio maybe talking across a phone circuit somehow. And continuity communications, what we do to maintain those communications in the event of a disaster. We're a specialized field, like I say once again, within the field of broad field of emergency communications. We can deliver operable and inoperable communications before, during, and after. These are some of the vehicles we work with here. There's that squeeze going on with the Coast Guard there, the 130. We're trying to squeeze one of our vehicles in there. I'll show you some more here. Most importantly, I want to discuss this part. This is what I wanted to speed up to. This whole concept came about as a result of Katrina. What was discovered in Katrina is that, first of all, the relationships weren't there. People didn't know who to talk to in terms of reestablishing communications. That was a huge one. And then the interoperability issue being the other one. You know, some departments had VHF radios, other departments had UHF radios. They couldn't talk to each other. So that created a great deal of complication there. As well as a lot of you, has anybody served, did anybody here serve during Katrina at all by any chance? Just offhand? Okay. Just wanted to find out. These are some of the stats there. 38 9/11 call centers. I believe it was actually more than that. 3 million customer phone lines. Half the radio stations were down. 44% of the area television stations went down. Almost 1,500 cell towers were incapacitated. I mean, if you can imagine. Good Lord. Obviously, like I said, this kind of thing would have a tremendous effect on the ability to communicate for officials. We had no idea what was going on. Situational awareness was an issue. When I speak of situational awareness, you know, I'm talking about folks knowing what's going on in the communities. We had no way of knowing, in some cases, you know, some communities may be short of water, maybe short of food, maybe there's no cellular communications, that sort of thing. We had no way of knowing that. There was no reach back, basically. And most importantly, at the bottom here, many available communications assets were not utilized because there were no communications plans. That has changed. Let's see. Okay. This is a lessons learned document that is available to the public, general public, by the way. You can look this up, and it's quite a thick document. But basically, it has a section that talks about the communications shortfalls that occurred there, as I've just discussed. Okay, let's talk about the customers and support. Okay, we can provide what we call disaster recovery centers. We call them DRCs. We did this during Sandy, and this is where the folks that you know, have lost everything, lost their homes, lost maybe loved ones and everything else, can come here and can get support. We can provide near those centers wire and wireless public internet, limited area. It's pretty close to the vehicle itself. We also have the ability to provide charging stations for phones. We also, and I want to highlight this too, local and tribal official support. We can provide it to the tribal level, local level. We can provide temporary mobile offices with the full communication suites. Live video feeds as necessary. Let's see here. This is a picture, it's kind of an overall picture of a system we call the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. And what this essentially does in a nutshell, it's an integrated public alert and warning system that allows us to send out one message over many modes of communication. You'll see, I believe there's television, emergency alert system, the EAS, NOAA, the NOAA radio systems. There's radio, cell phones, and everything else. Understand, you see where it says FEMA IPAWS. I like to say this, we're the vehicle. We're the vehicle. The drivers are the state, the folks who provide the information. They use the FEMA IPAWS architecture, the infrastructure, to communicate those messages in a consolidated manner so it goes across all of these systems consistently at the same time. And we also look, when we talk about these systems, and I'll mention this because I also work with American Samoa, one of the big focus issues is, especially in places like American Samoa, California, is we have to ensure that when we're alerting people that those alerts are in different languages. I think there's, when we do American Samoa, there's like 6 or 7 at least different languages for a public alert system. So it's a big focus issue. It's a huge focus issue for some of the, the groups that you might have folks out there that don't necessarily speak English as their primary language, that sort of thing. So let's see. And then we've also got disaster survivor assistance support teams. As you see, these are younger folks out here. During Sandy, we had folks actually, they're showing folks writing things. We actually had folks walking around with iPads, going out throughout the community and finding out, hey, are your phones working? You may not be able to talk to us, or, if you have no phone, you can't talk to us. We're taking a poll in the community. Do you have the necessities? Do you have food, water? So we actually had folks walking around surveying to find out if those resources were there. So that worked out pretty good in Sandy, but it's a huge area to cover, by the way. We also provide first responder support where communications have gone down. We did this also during Sandy, where there was a circuit lost to the Rockaways Island area that supported connectivity to the fire department down there. So I ended up assigning an out-of-state team to reestablish a short radio link out there so they get that back up and running. We provide radios and satellite devices as needed to those folks. Technical assistance, we can help their folks with restoring some of their antenna systems, radio systems. We have folks on the tech side that can actually do that. And of course, the incident support team, the folks who are actually serving in the emergency centers, the JFOs, intermediate operations facilities, things like that. We bring in communications to those folks. I know one of the facilities I worked in during Sandy, we actually had to bring in the entire telephone communications network to there, and this was a facility located probably about 20 miles away from the heart of the disaster. We had no telephone communications all the way out to that level, so we were looking for facilities like you see in the center one. Even though it looks, it's brick, it's pretty herky looking and everything else, you'd be surprised a disaster the size of Sandy or Katrina wipes out some of the critical nodes, central points of failure, and you've got no phone communications in those areas, in those facilities. So we can bring that in, we can bring our vehicles in and support that kind of capability through satellite connectivity. Let me see. Oh, we provide live video feed to local emergency operations centers. So we can send our vehicles out in the field, which is kind of cool, and these guys can actually shoot pictures back to our management center, emergency management centers, and they can see the damage that's occurred, so they can actually, take this stuff in, send it up to DC, say, hey, look, we need more resources. You can see the damages out here. So we've got vehicles that do that too, and they feed that video over, as you can see here, satellite capability. And here's the Emergency Operations Center. Typically, most of your state operations centers, in most cases, are pretty, in they've got backup power, backup lines and everything else, but, we're able to augment those communications capabilities, be they phone, radio, and everything else, because typically, even though they've got those capabilities, they get used up pretty darn quick. And then you've got folks coming in from other states, you've got additional, FEMA folks coming in, all kinds of, federal, state folks coming in, locals, everything else, and then you run out very quick. You'd be surprised. So we're able to bring in vehicles, standalone vehicles, self-supporting, with office space, workstations, and everything else that become an extended part of those operations centers, which works out fairly well. Okay, in summary, I think some of that I've already covered here. I wanted to say a couple other things here, and some of this covers just what I've said here. And I just want to make some comment on some other things, what we're doing here in the future. I get a lot of, I'm going to cover this one question because I get this all the time. One of the focus areas for FEMA is what we call whole community. We're looking at engaging more of the local community resources. Some of those resources include some of the amateur radio community, entities such as the Red Cross. We're starting to bring more of what they have into the overall response plans and everything else. So we have an understanding what they have an understanding what we have, and we work together better. So that's one of the focus areas I know that Craig Fugate, our administrator, is focused on right now. And I'm glad to say for Region 9, we probably lean forward more than any other region toward whole community. I think we lean more forward in terms of toward tribal areas and issues, things like that. I think we probably lead the nation. Yeah, yeah. And we've actually got, I know in FEMA Region 9, we've got a group of like 6 or 8 people as part of the tribal team. So that's pretty good. So I'm pretty proud of that. Are there any questions for either myself or Tom here? None at all.
Wow.
Wow,
Okay.
wow. Oh my gosh.
Well, one thing I do want to bring up, I forgot to mention, sorry, 2 mics. Yeah, let's try some feedback. Another thing we do is large-scale events, Super Bowls. How many of you are already thinking about 2016? I go, okay, one hand. It's coming. I'm already working it in Phoenix. Every Super Bowl is different, obviously, but it's different in how it's run. New Jersey, some other feds, not us, we're actually worked very well with some of the locals. In Phoenix, I'm seeing a little bit more of an issue. I'm seeing certain groups of feds coming in and telling the locals, sit in the corner, here's some forms, and we'll think it through and we'll tell you what to do. And the locals are going, really? We did this in 2008, and you can just stand over in the corner. So part of Dave and I's job is kind of be that buffer a bit. Some of the other feds that we work with are very good natured, and they're like, hey, we've got all these command posts from agencies you wouldn't even think of. Bureau of Indian Affairs has probably got one of the best command posts I've ever seen. And they will let anybody use it in the region. It's got to be a big event or something like that. I've got folks like Federal Protective Service. I've got folks like, believe it or not, Housing and Urban Development actually has some pretty cool radio caches, gear, stuff like that. TSA, the Viper teams, have their own command posts and radio cache and gear like that. So right now in Phoenix, I'm on the communications working group for Super Bowl 2015 that's in Glendale, suburb of Phoenix. So kind of I'm being that buffer between what do you need, not how to do it, but what do you need, how can we as the feds help you on the comm side. So as you guys start planning for 2016, Dave and I are both assets to you, either A, for gear, or B, just to buffer off some other fed who may be annoying you. Because we consider ourselves the local guys, so as much as we can help you, please engage us on that. And that goes for anything, whether it's Fleet Week, doesn't have to be a national special security event. It can be anything like that. Question?
So is there a central place that agencies and departments or states can go to see what you have available, what your capabilities are for sharing?
But Benita asked the million-dollar question. Is there a central point of contact where you can go to see what capabilities, command post, staffing, radio cache, that kind of gear, that you could go to as an agency to find out what we as the feds have? And unfortunately, the answer is no. We are just too huge. I mean, just within Department of Homeland Security, we're 22 different agencies. I never even knew BIA had a whole set of command posts until last week. You guys are in Phoenix, I was in Scottsdale at the National Tribal Emergency Managers Conference. So I'm just learning with my Rolodex who has what, but that's my job. I wish there was. And that is what Dave and I do.
Yeah, that's what we do. And also on tap for Tom and myself, I can say just on the FEMA side, we have we can go back to a national resource called the Mobile Emergency Response Support. They've got, I think, 5 depots throughout the United States. Huge depots that have vehicles like you just saw in here. That's where those vehicles are coming from. And 40-foot tractor trailers with communication suites, conference centers and everything else. And not just that. I mean, there are other resources we tap into that are not FEMA, not
Right.
DHS. And so we build into part of our plans, and we meet with our counterparts and shareholders and everything else and say, hey, look, what can we share together?
Yeah, for example, Cisco.
Cisco's there we go.
Has the nerve. Now, most of you think of the Cisco nerve as just being a big IP box. It also has audio gateways in it for radio and gear like that. So even though FEMA is, you would think, well, they're limited by Stafford Act. They can't do anything. That's not true. They have a lot of resources that they access that are not necessarily FEMA assets. We have a very big Rolodex of private sector and other agencies. So for example, Bureau of Indian Affairs, if they want to roll out their command post to help a city or a county, that's up to them. They don't have to go to FEMA. The only time that all rolls under FEMA is when there actually is a Stafford Act declaration. And then even then, if they've already deployed, then it's up to Dave and I to kind of sit there and go, is that really the best place for that to be at this point in time? And normally the answer will probably be yes if it's already there supporting you. Any other questions?
Something else I wanted to say real quick. That's okay. Something else I want to say real quick, and I almost forgot to say it here because it's really important. We in this room. we in this room are highly technical in nature. We deal with radios, communications, and everything else. I deal with it every day. Tom deals with it every day, and we talk about the technology. We talk about what radio types. We talk about, capabilities, trailers, vehicles. But the number one thing I remind myself of every day, and I know Tom does and everything, this whole thing is about, number one, relationships. It's relationships. It's building those relationships. I can have all the vehicles in the world. I can have all the capabilities in the world. But if I don't know how to use those radios, I don't know how to connect those radios, I don't know the right frequencies, I don't know how to interoperate with who I need to operate with, what good does that do me? Think about it. So I like to emphasize that it's all about building relationships, maintaining those relationships, and using those relationships in an overall effective response. That's all I got to say. Yep, that's all I've got.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.